Start your wellness journey at Whole Foods Market, where it's Jumpstart January through the 16th. Stock up on supplements with some of the year's biggest savings. Plus, save on air-chilled organic boneless skinless chicken breasts, organic Honeycrisp apples, organic large Hass avocados, and more. And since Whole Foods Market is the only certified organic national grocer, it's easy to make them your wellness destination. Jumpstart your January now at Whole Foods Market.
Major phone carriers make you sign contracts with rigid data plans to trap you into a kind of forced phonogamy. Sounds pretty insecure if you ask me. At Consumer Cellular, we believe in a more consensual and healthy form of phonogamy, free of contracts and more flexible to your data needs. This way, you stick around not because we force you to with contracts and fees, but because you love our phone plans. Like ardently love our phone plans. Phonogamously. Consumer Cellular. When freedom calls, we're here to answer. Call us at 1-888-FREEDOM.
Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. You may not have heard that first bit, Kieran, as I just realised I was talking into a microphone that wasn't plugged in, so I had to turn my chair around. BAFTA's gone already. That's a record, I think, isn't it? Later in the show, we'll be hearing from Martin Cassidy. He's Chief Executive of Ref Support UK, an independent registered charity which supports referees at all levels of the game. It's a really eye-opening interview. I'm sure you'll agree. But we do have some news stories, Kieran. But first, I think we need to acknowledge that there's been a big story down on the South Coast. Your beloved Saint Graham Potter has gone to Chelsea for 3 or 4 months. But you have a new manager. What are your thoughts?
He's come from Ukraine. He's an Italian manager, Roberto. I think an expression from Graham Potter is to raise an eyebrow. Yeah, that's about as much as you ever got from him. I think we're going to move slightly more towards the Conte style of touchline expressionism. So that will provide some entertainment. New managers, you always look at them with an element of curiosity. I want him to be a success. That's he certainly seems to play the same. He's coaching his same style of football as the Potter ball, which you've come to know and hate. So we look forward to it.
Yeah, he's a fan of all-out attack, apparently, so let's hope he forgets about the defensive bit. Our first news story, Kieran, is something that you predicted a while back, and I wouldn't say I scoffed, Kieran. I wouldn't say I poured scorn on the idea, but I thought it unlikely. But it turns out, as always, that your insight and judgment was clearer than mine, because UEFA executives are considering staging Champions League matches outside of Europe.
Yes, and I think this is part of a much broader issue with regards to how are club owners, in particular, going to extract more money from the game. If you've got a home fixture at Old Trafford or the Bernabeu and so on, your regular season ticket holders, there's a fixed amount that they are prepared to pay. If you decide to take those matches to New York or Beijing or Sydney, and we saw this with the Liverpool versus Manchester United friendly, which took place in Thailand over the course of the summer, you can charge what you want, because there will be people there say, well, this could be my only chance of getting to see Real Madrid play in a competitive game for many, many years. And therefore, the prices that can be charged will be eye-watering. So this is something, and the way that sort of UEFA and the European Club Association work is that stories get leaked on purpose to say, well, we're thinking about having discussions in respect of this. It won't be on the agenda just yet. And part of the reason for that is that the UEFA Champions League format isn't being revised until 2024-25 when we move to the Swiss-style model. But remember, clubs have more fixtures under the Swiss-style model. So why not take one of those fixtures to a foreign market? Because it's going to generate more money from the club. Now, I'm presently sitting in my university office in Liverpool. I share my office with my good friend Chris, who's a red through and through season ticket holder, and as you can imagine, he's not very happy because he's not missed a home game for God knows how long, and the prospect of Liverpool playing a what he considers to be a home fixture against opponents is completely against the grain of how we perceive football to be. But club owners don't perceive football to be that way. Or as we say, some club owners, especially the American owners, and this isn't being xenophobic. The American owners see football as a global sport, as a global form of entertainment, and they want to take it to a global audience. We see football clubs as representation of our individual towns and cities, part of our history, culture, heritage, all of those things which we hold so dear, the badge, the colour of the shirt, the stadium, and everything that goes with it. But the owners want to make more money out of football. And I think we will see this initially. I think the talk is of one or two of the group games. Then perhaps have the main knockout phase take place as normal, sort of home and away. But we saw a couple of years ago, and this has been hinted at by some of the executives at UEFA, that remember when in the COVID year in which the semi-finals and the final all took place in the same city over the course of a week.
Yeah.
Well, why not take that to the highest bidder? So you've got one-legged semi-finals, just like you have semi-finals in a World Cup, and the final, and that's all taking place. Would Tokyo or New York or Sydney be willing to bid and pay a huge amount of money to host that? Well, yes, they would, because the Champions League is the type of tournament. Apart from the World Cup final, it generates some of the biggest viewing figures on the planet. So that's the way of the world. Now, what we've then got to ask ourselves is, well, if that's successful from a UEFA point of view, where does that leave the Premier League? Yeah. Because we'll be talking about this fairly shortly, but over half of the clubs in the Premier League now have US either full owners or part owners. And again, this isn't a dig at them because they're American. They have a different perception of football because they weren't brought up in South London. They weren't brought up in Brighton or Manchester or Liverpool. And they see football through a different lens. And it's a financial one rather than an emotional one.
There's a few things off the back of that, Kieran. Firstly, I'm still quite cross that Australia take part in Eurovision, to be perfectly honest. If it then turns out that the UEFA Champions League final was held in Sydney, I'll be apoplectic. Secondly, as you said, once again, it's fans who get the shitty end of the stick, because that Liverpool fan you share an office with, who goes home and away, there'll be many people like him who will find the money to get to Singapore or Tokyo or whatever it is. And, that could be coming from God knows where. At a time of global economic crisis, in a few years' time, there will be fans from this country who do what it takes to get the money to go. Thirdly, I'm happy to have a go at the American owners. It terrifies me that they could end up with a majority in the Premier League and essentially do what they want. But the American owners should know that NFL fans were apoplectic. As cross as I would be about the Champions League being in Sydney, they were furious when one of their games was taken away and played at Wembley, because they play far fewer home games a season than our clubs do. So not only did they miss the chance to see a game, they didn't get refunds on their season tickets. Or certainly the friend of mine lives in America, that may have changed. but it just annoys. So American owners know that it upsets fans, but they do it anyway. It's so infuriating, really infuriating. Anyway, luckily there's a story coming up that's going to cheer me up. This story really has to. I should technically say it gives me no pleasure to report that Brighton are on a naughty step, but I'd be lying, and I'm not a very good actor. So any anger, already the anger from the first news story is ebbing away, Kieran. As I have to say to you, Brighton have been fined, Kieran. Brighton have been fined for breaking agent rules. For shame, Kieran. For shame.
Indeed. And just a quick taking ourselves back to the first story. Perhaps if we had an independent regulator of football, as proposed by my good friend Tracy Crouch, then this could help to protect the game.
That was a coupon buster. You've got in early there, Kieran. Anyway, back to the biggest story. Back to this story. The biggest news story in football this decade.
So what's happened here is, I believe Brighton been fined around about £360,000, and this is in respect of a breach of the rules relating to intermediaries, stroke agents. And I think there were quite a few players involved. So when Brighton got to the Premier League, they first time you signed some players, and then I think the club effectively did some form of internal audit, and during that they realised that they'd 7 players who didn't appear to have representation as such. So the club reported itself to the FA, say we think we've done something. There's been. The club says it's an administrative error. But the way that this works is that, as we've established, that agents, in respect of transfers and deals and so on, they can represent the club or they can represent the player. Now, HMRC are not always comfortable with this, and I spoke to our friend Jonathan Booker here, and we've laughed in the past that HMRC only have 2 people who are effectively scanning the football industry. Well, I think they might have taken on an apprentice, so they might have a bit more. And if the football club pays the agent's fees on behalf of the player, then that's a benefit in kind, and that has implications for PAYE and national insurance. And of course, and I don't know the exact details in respect to the Brighton case, but also things such as VAT. A football club can recover VAT from an agent who's VAT registered, whereas just like you or I, if we have a tradesman come to the house and they give us an invoice and then they charge VAT on top, we can't reclaim that unless it's a cash job, which clearly we wouldn't agree to anyway. So that's been the issue. So Brighton did report themselves to the FA. The FA have investigated, and they fined the club. I suspect, and I'm not trying to do some whataboutery here again, sort of speaking to Jonathan, he says, well, he's actually surprised that there's not more clubs who are being involved with this, because it's not an uncommon potential issue which could arise. So if you've got 7 players who don't appear to have agents involved in deals, that's unusual. I think it could be argued that it should have been spotted at an earlier stage, but it wasn't. So that's where we are. So, we're on the naughty step.
This next news story, Kieran, I probably should have included slightly earlier considering what we were talking about in our first news story, but I was so excited about getting onto Brighton being in trouble that I decided to keep it. But it looks like there is another Premier League team that could end up in American ownership.
Yes. So here we have AFC Bournemouth, who are presently owned by a guy called Maxine Denim, And he's Russian born, but he is a British citizen.
Yeah.
I think he lives in Switzerland. He's owned the club for about a decade. I think he's spoken about half a dozen words since buying the club. He controls Bournemouth via a company called Fortina Enterprises, based in the British Virgin Islands. So all of that is
He's
textbook.
Ticking a lot of boxes, isn't he?
He's ticking a lot of boxes, yes. So, why is he thinking of selling? Well, I talk to people who get involved in deals. Yeah, this has been on the cards for quite a few years. He's been looking for an exit route. So just because he was Russian born, it doesn't mean that this is due to the illegal war that's taking place in Ukraine, instigated by Putin and his cronies. Demet has been looking for an exit route for some time. He's put a lot of money into Bournemouth. It's around about 150 million quid. I think he's looking to get his money back. Now, it could be that he's been looking to get his money back a little bit quicker following the war, because we don't know where his assets are located. And we know that people with a Russian background are perhaps subject to additional scrutiny. So it looks as if it's now going to be sold to a gentleman called Bill Foley, who is a 77-year-old American investor who owns the Golden Knights ice hockey club, ice hockey team franchise, based in that place that you associate with ice, Las Vegas. So he bought a franchise in the NHL, what's called an expansion franchise. So the way that American sports operates is that when they want to increase the number of teams, you effectively have to pay a franchise fee, which can run into hundreds of millions of dollars. Why is he buying into football at the age of 77? That might seem a bit of a strange thing to do, and trying to work out his motivation is strange. But Premier League clubs, and we're probably talking somewhere in the region of 130 to 150 million pounds here, which is cheap by Premier League standards. But I think it reflects that A, the Bournemouth stadium's quite small, and B, you always factor in the possibility of relegation, and clearly Bournemouth have only just come up from the Championship, after a few years in the Premier League previously. Sterling has tanked. I've just seen come through on my ticker. It's just now gone to a record low once again for around about 40 years. So that makes Premier League football clubs very attractive and very cheap from an American investor point of view. We know that Asian investors, especially Chinese investors, have gone pretty lukewarm with regards to investing in the Premier League because of a changing sentiment from the Chinese government. I think Bill Foley is more likely to be perhaps a bit more of a visible presence. Certainly, by all accounts, he attends every match of the Golden Knights. He did appear in a promotional video for the Golden Knights, piloting a helicopter in army uniform, which might upset Harry Redknapp and the other residents of Sandbanks if he tries to do the same at Bournemouth. He's also got a record of being a bit trigger happy when it comes to sacking managers. So I think a change in ownership, and it could be, I think, a sort of a change in culture at Bournemouth if the new owner comes in. So this deal does appear to be pretty much pretty far down the road. So we'll have to wait and see. But there's certainly no reasons why there should be any owners and directors tests hurdles to significantly overcome. So we could see this deal go through quite quickly.
Man City are not short of money, Kieran, as we know, but they've got a bit more in their pockets this week, haven't they?
Yes. This is because the American fund called Silver Lake, which bought it bought just over 10% of Manchester City a couple of years ago, and it bought it for $500 million. Now, this here is buying the City Football Group, so it's not just Manchester City itself;
okay.
it's all of those other
Right.
10 to 12 companies dotted around the world. But they've just bought another 4% in the City Football Group, originally. Silver Lake were very much a tech investor, and they used to concentrate on the area. But remember, we've had this discussion about Manchester City are trying to be at the forefront of the metaverse, with regards to what's happening in the stadium to try to get fans more involved who are watching matches elsewhere, and they've got that deal with Sony. Also, Silver Lake have expanded into rugby and baseball. But I think it's a sign of the confidence of, once again, another American investor seeing football as being beyond what we are familiar with in terms of pies, pints, turning up, giving our team as much support as possible. I've spoken about bringing the stadium to the fans instead of the fans to the stadium. If you've got fans on a global basis, and I suspect that some of these investors are taking a similar viewpoint. So,
sorry, can I just ask? Can I just ask Kieran, which way round would this have happened? Would Silver Lake have gone to the City Group and say we want to invest more, or would the City Football Group have gone to them and said, do you fancy buying a bit more because we're short of money?
Well, City Football Group aren't short of money. I think that's the one thing that we can be confident of. The chances are that there's always ongoing discussions between major shareholders and corporates. And what will happen is Silver Lake saying, well, we've got spare cash. We want to increase our involvement. If this will take them up to around about 14%. That's not going to disturb City's majority shareholders based in UAE. So they still control the club on a day-to-day basis, and they get the benefit of additional cash. But it's almost certainly coming from Silver Lake, looking to say, well, we have funds, we need to put them somewhere. And as part of our assessment, we think that the City Football Group is an investment. Can we agree a price?
And rumours of another Man City story this week as well, Kieran.
Yes, this is you've got to give credit. There's a really good Twitter account called Josimar Football, which I think it's Norwegian. They're the sort of investigative journalists, and this involves a regional partner of Manchester City called 8xBet, which appears to be sort of focused in Thailand, Indonesia, Vietnam. But when Josimar Football starts to look at it a little bit more depth, the founder of 8xBet, you can't find him on the internet. He appears to have no digital footprint at all, which is unusual in 2022. The CEO appears to be using an avatar borrowed from somebody else, so trying to get a picture of the CEO is difficult. When you then move across the other realms of social media, 8xBet only has 2 employees on LinkedIn. Well, if it's a regional partner and we're dealing with very sizable countries in Thailand, Indonesia, and Vietnam, that again, it's just it doesn't pass the smell test. You just feel a little bit uneasy. If you take a look at Manchester City themselves, they've not mentioned the deal as such on their Twitter account. They seem to be using Teddy Sheringham. This is 8xBet to sort of be their ambassador and record a few videos. But these are being watched by 2 men and a dog on YouTube because there's little promotion for it. And then there's sort of a mysterious link to an organisation called QOO, which again, very odd. And that appears to be based in Dubai. And that, is that controlling ATEX there? It's not good from a transparency point of view. Manchester City did have an involvement around about 12 months ago with another organisation, which all went sort of very wrong very quickly, and I think that was very quietly dropped. And all I would say is that before you get into bed with anybody, just check them out. You do due diligence for a reason. And City here appear to sort of, we've used this phrase, blinded by the check. They appear to have taken the check, but what exactly are they getting involved with? And that's a cause of concern, because if you are a high-profile football club, you're going to come under scrutiny. So the best thing to do is to do that homework yourself. And then this could, of course, be absolutely nothing. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the organisation. It just doesn't look quite right.
Well, it's interesting because I believe that previous case you mentioned was a cryptocurrency partner that again turned out to have didn't exist essentially, and Man City were very, very quick and very efficient in dealing with that situation. So it would be odd if they had allowed it to happen again. So that's clearly one to keep an eye on. West Brom, Kieran, we're used to managers resigning. Every now and again, a politician resigns. That's less rare. Every now and again, a chairman of a club resigns. But there's been some strange resignations at West Brom, Kieran.
Yes, and not for the first time. This West Bromwich Albion's auditors, who are PricewaterhouseCoopers, who are one of the biggest firms of accountants on the planet. They've quit as the auditors of West Bromwich Albion. Now, that's the fourth time in the last 7 years that the auditors have quit. The whole point about being an auditor in the first place is that you're trying to build up a relationship with an organisation. And there is a case for saying you shouldn't stay there too long. But equally, if you're only there for a year or so, you're not becoming familiar with the organisation to really get your feet under the table. And the purpose of the auditors is to effectively review the finances and to say whether or not, in their view as professionals, that they show a true and fair view. So for PwC to resign pretty quickly after being appointed, and they're not being the first people to do this, it's a red flag. And also, the finance director of West Brom has left. He's actually gone to Brighton. So, so I don't know whether he was headhunted or whether he was looking for another job. But so their finance director has gone as well. There's a very, very strange looking £7 million loan to the owner of the club, Lai Guo-Chan, which apparently is going to be repaid when West Bromwich Albion pay Lai Guo-Chan a £7 million dividend. So that is very much sleight of hand.
Hang on a second, Kieran. Sorry, Kieran. Sorry to interrupt, but just to clarify, so the club have lent him £7 million, and he will pay that to the club when the club give him £7 million.
Yes. So that just, again, I just mentioned the smell test. That looks very strange. He says that his own businesses back home have suffered as a result of COVID. When a company makes a decision, that decision, if it's made at board level, you have what's referred to as a fiduciary duty. I don't want to go and sound too even more boring than normal, but that duty is that you must act in the best interests of the company, which is here West Bromwich Albion Football Club. Now, is it in the best interests to lend money to somebody when it could be argued that money will be better spent on signing players, investing in infrastructure, and so on in respect of West Bromwich Albion Football Club? There are some other unusual loans going back a few years in respect of a previous owner, which don't appear to have been repaid. And there's also an organisation called Shareholders for Albion who represent all of, I think, like Gouch, I think he owns about 86% of the club. But there's an organisation called Shareholders for Albion that represents sort of lots of individual shareholders who have collectively come together and are flagging some of their concerns about the governance and operational activities of the club. They wrote to the board, which they're entitled to do as shareholders. They wrote to the board a few months ago with 40 questions, which were pretty detailed. And the response of West Bromwich Albion is to completely ignore them, which I think is a sign of first of all unprofessionalism and secondly contempt. Shareholders, no matter how small they are entitled to have their voice heard. Normally that's just at the annual general meeting, but these shareholders do represent a sizable, if albeit minority, part of the share base. And if the club can't find the time to respond to shareholders, then who can it find the time to respond to? So it's pretty unimpressive behaviour from the people who are making the decisions at that club.
Do you know, I'm glad to find, Kieran, that there's a fairly sizable football club that are managing their finances the same way that I do, which is pretty much not a week goes by without me saying to Ali, can you put some money in the joint account so I can get some stuff and I'll pay you back when I've put some money in the joint account, which is pretty much the same logic. Just down the road, Kieran, Coventry are a club we both like. We both had happy times there. We talk about them more often than I would wish, but they've taken a huge hit cash flow-wise, haven't they, recently?
Yes, and this is because due to, first of all, sort of legacy issues with regards to is it called the CBS Arena?
Yeah, whatever.
Coventry Buildings. No, it's the Rico.
Highfield Road. I still call it Highfield Road.
Yes, yes, that'll do for us. They've missed out on. They've had to postpone already this season 4 matches. 3 were due to outstanding issues with regards to the landlords. And of course, we've had the passing away of Her Majesty, so therefore another match was missed at home, and this means that Coventry have hardly played at their home fixtures. And from a cash point of view, yes, those matches will be rescheduled, but it's cost them over £1 million to date. And as you've said, the important thing here is cash flow. They will get some of that money back at a later date. I think one of those matches was supposed to be at home to West Brom, which would have, ironically, the club we've just been talking about.
Yeah.
But that would have had, if that had been a 3 p.m. Saturday match, it would have been ramped.
Yeah.
That's the downside. It's people who go to the to the matches as walk-up fans and sell out the ground that can make a big difference. Will that be the same if that match is rescheduled for February on a Tuesday night, which might also be clashing with Champions League or whatever? We have been talking about Champions League a little bit earlier, and this is one of the things which, unfortunately, the EFL clubs have to deal with, is that their matches clash with Champions League matches, and it does happen. A small, but it is a noticeable decrease if you compare attendances at Saturday compared to midweek. And yes, there's people that can't get there for work reasons. There's kids that can't get there because they've got school the following day and so on. You have to take all of that into consideration. But it's a shame for Coventry because they had a good season last season, and they're presently at the bottom of the Championship. Part of the reason for that is, of course, they played fewer fixtures.
Yeah, they've only played away games, basically.
Yes.
I believe they're looking for compensation for at least one of the postponements from the Commonwealth Games Organising Committee, because I think they claim, because the Commonwealth Games used it for rugby sevens, was it? I think, and so they claim that they left the pitch in a terrible state. But I believe the Commonwealth Games are saying that the pitch was left in a terrible state due to a gig that was played at Coventry. So that's another situation to keep an eye on. We got a couple more news stories, Kieran, before that brilliant interview with Martin Cassidy from Ref Support UK. The first one, unfortunately, I'm afraid to say, people will chuckle listening to this. They shouldn't, but they will. Swindon Town have got a big bill to pay for an unfortunate reason.
Yes. You and I, we both attended matches home and away for many, many years. And at times we get angry.
Oh, yeah.
It could be with the performance. It could be with, decisions going against us. It could be it's just one of those days. But you still, if I go to somebody's house and they serve me a bad meal, I don't go and lob a brick through their window. And if somebody comes to my house and I cook them a bad meal, I don't lob a brick through my own window. But this is what some, and this is a minority. Some of the Swindon fans have been smashing up the seats and smashing up the toilets at their own stadium.
Yeah,
and this just doesn't make sense. Yeah, we all get frustrated with results. Swindon have just been through a period of a takeover where the previous owner, Lee Power, I think it's fair to say, wouldn't be on our good uns list in terms of club ownership. And the new owners come in, has reduced the debts, but he's not a billionaire who's putting in huge amounts. They're trying to reduce the debts, and it's just sort of it's costing the club money. It's now having to go and spend a lot of money repairing damage because you can't have people coming to the subsequent matches to say, well, here's your seat. Oh, by the way, there isn't one there. And you can't go to the toilet because the toilet's been smashed. So, Swindon, they're just simply punching themselves in the face. And that's, I'm not condoning smashing up away grounds because that's just rude. But smashing up your own ground is just plain daft.
I'm glad you made that distinction, Kieran, because I was going to say we aren't implying that if you're going to smash somewhere up, don't make sure it's not your own ground. Don't do it anywhere. Yes, it's more than rude. It's just stupid and wrong. We've talked about streaming rights, Kieran, quite a lot recently, especially at the National League level. But there's been news.
Yes, clearly Wrexham, Ryan and McElhenney are the drivers in respect of this. Wrexham are very keen to have streaming of matches, and I think also the way that they suggested sharing the money was pretty egalitarian. So they felt that there was a market for this. And there has now been a pronouncement by the National League that they are bringing out their own OTT, which stands for over the top platform. And what this is going to do, they've got an agreement with BT Sport to broadcast some matches, and the agreement is going to be, it's going to start in the second half of the season, that they're going to stream the non-televised matches and also the matches which are not kicking off at 3 p.m. And you might be seeing, people might say, well, hold on, surely most of the matches kick off at 3 p.m. But remember, we are now seeing in non-league football, as a result of the cost of living consequences, and remember those cost of living consequences, especially when it comes to energy costs, do have implications for football clubs, because if you've got your floodlights on, that's a sizable additional cost. So if those matches, which are now going to be kicking off at 12:30 or 1 o'clock, they could be televised. They could be streamed to people who can buy passes. The Wrexham have picked up a lot of interest because the Welcome to Wrexham show, which is on Disney Plus, it's a good little watch. That's all I say. I've watched every episode, and it's whimsical, but it does also give the opportunity for the fans and the people around the club to voice themselves. It's certainly good fun as to watch as a fan. So there will be people who would have taken an additional interest. Whether that's enough to persuade them to pay a tenner to watch an individual match, we don't know. But until you try these things, you don't find out just what are the financial consequences. So yeah, fair play to the National League. It's not being rejected out of hand. The important thing, it's not just the pie; it's how you cut it, and I think the distribution of monies, I think, is the area which needs to be dealt with a bit of tender loving care.
I believe, Kieran, and if I'm wrong, I know there's a director of Chippenham Town out there who'd only be too pleased to tell me so. But I think at the moment it's only Isthmian League and below level that have been given permission to kick off early. But I think what I'm hearing is almost inevitable that by the time December, January comes, the National League will also be giving their teams permission to kick off early, because the energy crisis is only going to get much worse before it gets better. One final news story, Kieran, before our interview. There's about to be one hell of a financial bun fight in Germany.
Yes, you're absolutely right. The Bundesliga TV rights, they're up for auction. They've not increased in value in the same way as we've seen with La Liga and the Premier League, and part of the reason to that is that German football, which I personally love, we know who's going to win Bundesliga every year.
Yeah,
it's going to be Bayern Munich. Yeah. And the problem with football is that if you have a dynasty, as far as the winners of the trophies are concerned, trying to persuade people to pay for those rights becomes more challenging. So we've seen a flatlining of German rights. So what's happening is that it looks like the German authorities, they're going to go to private equity companies, and when I wrote the Price of Football book, I did actually have a chapter which said, what has private equity done for football, and just left a blank page. But the publisher said, you can't do that. I said, well, I think fans. He said, fans won't understand it. I think fans will understand that. Yeah. So I'm not a huge fan of private equity, in the sense of private equity is not interested in football; it's interested in money. But we have seen organisations such as CVC invest in La Liga and Ligue 1, and by all accounts, there's about half a dozen potential suitors for the Bundesliga, and we're probably talking figures of around about €3.5 billion for money coming into the sport, and then you're selling the rights for a sizable period, giving them 10 to 20%. And that's the trouble. I've mentioned this with regards to Barcelona as well, that if you give somebody 20% of your income for the next 25 years, that will give you some money now, but it means in a few years' time, Barcelona have got 75% of their TV revenues, and Real Madrid have got 100% of theirs, and Chelsea have got 100% of theirs, and then all you're doing is you've got another problem to deal with. So is it a short-term fix? Potentially could be seen that way. In my experience and observation, when it comes to negotiations between private equity companies that do this for a living and football administrators, private equity tends to win in terms of who's got the best out of the deal.
Funnily enough, Kieran, when I wrote my book, Who Are You? 92 league clubs and why you shouldn't support them, I initially left the Brighton page blank. But on the other side of it, on the why you shouldn't support them bit, I just was going to put because it's Brighton. But my publisher also wouldn't do that, but not for reasons that the audience wouldn't understand, but because Brighton has a huge number of independent bookshops and one of the biggest Waterstones in the country. So unfortunately, financial issues were considered more important than my rivalry with your club. Now, Kieran, it's interview time, and VAR was supposed to make life more easy for referees, but instead, recently, it seems just to have put them under more pressure than ever before. And it doesn't occur to many of us that these people under pressure are human beings as well, as are all those young match officials who keep the game going at grassroots level, sometimes under enormous provocation. So we asked Martin Cassidy of the only independent charity for referees, Ref Support UK, for some insight.
Start your wellness journey at Whole Foods Market, where it's Jumpstart January through the 16th. Stock up on supplements with some of the year's biggest savings. Plus, save on air-chilled organic boneless skinless chicken breasts, organic Honeycrisp apples, organic large Hass avocados, and more. And since Whole Foods Market is the only certified organic national grocer, it's easy to make them your wellness destination. Jumpstart your January now at Whole Foods Market.
Martin, thank you very much for joining us. Tell us a little bit about yourself first, and then your work with Ref Support UK.
Yeah, thanks, Kev. It's great to be on with you two guys, a regular listener, and I really do feel quite humbled coming on here as a guest. And the reason we started it up, my background is I got to the professional level as assistant referee, got injured, and contacted the FA and said, "Oh, I'm going to retire." And then they said, well, look, these jobs are coming up as a referee coach to find the next generation of referees coming through the semi-pro into the pro level. So do you want to come for an interview, basically? And I went there. I worked at Wembley for 7 years in the referees department. Left under a bit of a cloud. There was redundancies, and I was one of the guys that got made redundant. Questioned it, really. Ended up in court.
Wow. Right.
And then I've got a non-disclosure agreement for certain subjects in it. So while I was there, I realised that there just needed to be a bigger voice for referees that wasn't funded by the FA or any governing bodies. The Referee Association has been a great organisation for referees for years, but they've never spoke publicly or criticised the FA publicly because they were, and I think they still do, get funded by the FA and the PGMOL, so they never do anything to criticise them publicly. So I said, well, I want to start an organisation, but it must be a charity. And the reason I wanted it to be a charity was if I just talked to Martin Cassidy, ex-employee of the FA, I'd just become this bitter ex-employee. But if it's charities talking, people tend to listen a bit more. So all the trustees have operated at pro level. We're all really experienced in supporting referees. So, to do it under an umbrella of a registered charity was definitely the right way to go.
I didn't know about your non-disclosure agreement, so I'm just crossing out 3 of the next 4 questions.
Only 3.
I was going to, and also interestingly, normally it's Kieran who answers my questions before I ask them, but I was going to ask you about the importance of being a charity, and also specifically the importance of being totally independent. Your website really stresses the importance of the total independence, doesn't it? So clearly that's something that means a lot to you.
Yeah, it does. It absolutely does. And what happens in football, particularly refereeing, is that people are scared to speak out because they fear consequences for their opinion. There's a regulation in football for referees where they can't step out of regulation, believe it or not. Right. And I remember I had this huge case where one of our ambassadors got charged by the FA for writing to a club saying, "We know you just got off with that case, but we know you did it, so we're going to record you in future. So behave yourself." Yeah. And he got charged by the FA, even though it was in our ambassadorial role on our email. And the FA lawyer said, "Oh no, you can't step out of regulation from the FA. Whatever you do, even if you're a police officer and you write a letter that they deem to be inappropriate, they can charge you," which is ridiculous, isn't it? So, yeah.
We have ascertained that they can't actually charge Kieran and I, which is a great relief because we would be in big trouble. How do you fund Ref Support UK then, Martin?
We do it mainly from donations. We've even had a referee passed away, and he said all the donations to come to us. We get lots of donations, sponsorship. We get there's a company called Find My Kit who sponsor us. And when we have an event, we like to hire a football club. Don't go to a posh hotel, and give some money to the football club. We put on free foods. We have really good speakers there, and they get funded by sponsors. So we've proven that none of us get any expenses, none of us claim any fee. So we've proven that you can support referees to a really high level without any money whatsoever. It's just the passion and the drive to support referees that is the currency we use.
And how many referees do you represent, so to speak, Martin? And are you representing only grassroots level refs, or are you representing those match officials at the very top level?
Yeah, we mainly concentrate on grassroots level. There's a lot of people don't know this, actually. I don't know if you guys know this, but most of the referees support at pro level, PGMOL level, by the Prospect Union. They
Wow.
they
That's
are, yeah.
interesting.
So it is interesting, and they've done a great job, with getting maternity leave and employment rights, even though they're not technically employed, holiday pay, and there's some wonderful work that Prospect Union has done. I actually feel that the support that PGOL give their referees is good, is really, really good. It's the FA and the county FAs that we have our problem with, which is where we sit in regards to how to address it. We try to connect what happens at the pro level back to the grassroots level, and we've always said, I don't know if you've seen it, I had a bit of a row live on TalkSport with Neil Warnock because he went at a referee. They went at a referee, and I can't remember what player it was. It was a player who headbutted one of his players when he was at Middlesbrough.
Yeah.
And he went at the referee and said, you're a disgrace. He did all this pantomime antics. So I was talking about this on TalkSport, and they said, look, we got Neil on the other line. So I just said to him, look, why did you go after the referee? He never headbutted the player. Why didn't he go after the player who headbutted your player? You took the easy option out, and he wouldn't have it. So it's what I was trying to connect them is that what people see at pro level and on TV gets mimicked by grassroots level when there's a 14, 15-year-old referee in there. And it's an important link that we always try to make sure is out in the open. How do these kids learn about, a Ronaldo goal celebration or Peter Crouch robot? They do that purely from on TV. So it would be ridiculous to say that they wouldn't mimic the poor behaviour that you see with people like Mr. Warnock and others.
Well, I mean, the frustrating thing from your point of view is that Neil Warnock, and you're not the only person to have had live arguments with him. Trust me, he's a qualified referee, isn't he?
Well, yeah, but there's people out there who've had qualified, in other trades, and it turned out to be, not very good. And I think just because, do you know what I mean? I could be really cutting here, with certain doctors and stuff, that you just think just because you've got a qualification, it doesn't mean you got any credibility or validation to be able to go at a referee and abuse them and threaten like he does. And one of the worst things a ref can hear is, "Oh, don't worry, ref." Particularly grassroots when they got the flag. I'm a qualified referee. It's probably the worst thing anyone could see. But has he referees? Has he refereed? Has he gone out there week in, week out and refereed? No, he's took the course and probably did a game for some TV show, really. So there's no credence in it, him saying he's a qualified. And also, when did he qualify? Many years ago, many years ago, when the game's significantly different. And I think I give no credence to him at being a qualified referee in inverted commas.
Before we carry on, can I just pick you up, Martin, on something you said there about the PGMOL refs and Prospect? So you say they're not technically employees. So what is their status in? Because I think most of us thought, as professional referees, they counted as full-time employees. So
no, I think the Championship and the Premier League is classed as full-time employees. Outside that, League One, League Two, and the conference level or National League, as it's called now, I think they're not full-time employees. Right. Yeah. So and it's one of the problems with quality referees coming through, because some quality referees who could really do a really good job on the Premier League and the Championship won't go there because they're on more money in their occupation, the current occupation. So, not getting paid enough at that level to give up these jobs. And of course, like a player, your career could end quite quickly as a referee with an injury or anything like that. So there's something that needs to be looked at there with regards to what they get and who they attract.
We're going to come on to the finances later. I think, Martin, doing some research last night and looking at your website, it's a much bigger figure than I thought, because you talk about there being 28,000 match officials at grassroots levels, which is a huge number. What are the biggest challenges that they face and that you face looking after them?
I think a lot of it is a lot of referees just feel disenfranchised from the governing body and the county FAs. There's the county FAs basically are normally limited companies and not-for-profit companies where they just work on their own under an umbrella of the FA, but they basically can do what they want. And the biggest challenge we find is that very early on, 4 or 5 years ago, I started up at a 24/7, 365 day hotline where they could phone up, because when you referee at the weekends, all the offices are closed. And a lot of the people who support referees, so they can't get any sort of instant support. And a lot of them just need this sort of like shoulder to cry on, so to speak, or have I done the right thing? Is this right? So that's why I started it. And that's why we absolutely know the figures that the FA put out, 0.01% of games, contain a proven case of assault. That's just ridiculous. And when you dig down into that, that's 2 a week. That's actually 2 proven cases of assault a week.
Yeah.
Now, that's just reported. And what we find is that if Mark Clattenburg's referee in Tottenham Chelsea, that famous game, he lives in Newcastle. He's not going to bump into any of those players. At grassroots level, everything is localised. So when someone does get assaulted or abused or threatened, it's highly likely these referees are going to see these players on the school runs, in the pub, in the supermarket, where this abuse can continue, and it does continue. So this disenfranchisement is just the main problem, where they don't feel as if, particularly the FA, the county FAs, will go that extra mile to support them off the field of play when something like this happens. The biggest problem.
That's a really interesting point. That idea of referees being local and bumping into people that might have assaulted them or they may have sent off. And also, I don't know why, but it's the 3rd time this week someone's mentioned Mark Clattenburg to me. People, the universe seems determined to remind me of the referee that hated Palace more than anybody else. Are you working with clubs, Martin, particularly at the highest level? Do you have a presence there? Do they ask you for advice, or
no?
Are you...
No, they don't officially. I do. When I was having a go at Warnock, the secretary of Middlesbrough emailed me and said, how dare you, call him a pantomime character and all this. And I just went back to him and said, well, what are you doing employing a pantomime character? Because you are. Yeah. He's just, everywhere he goes, he becomes this pantomime character on the sidelines. And, well, mainly it's grassroots. And we visit clubs. I don't know if you're aware of it, but if clubs get to a certain level of discipline, so many yellow cards or red cards, they get a fine and they go into get called into Wembley to get preached to, really, saying if you carry on, this will happen, that'll happen. So we go into clubs and talk to talk to players about, do you really think mouthing at a referee and giving them loads of stick is going to get him or her to change their decision? And what I always do a bit of research with them and find out, why they've been cautioned, talk to other referees who refereed them. And invariably, it's very rare that some of these grassroots players are getting cautioned and sent off for mouth. It's always physical challenges. And that's the other way around. You always find they get sent off and second yellows for stupid challenges after they've had a silly yellow for dissent. Right. So what we've always say is, why when you're on 1 yellow, do you do something stupid on the second yellow and make it dead easy? And then you just get like stupid comments, which you'll hear in football saying, oh, come on, ref, it's only his first one, particularly in derbies or cup finals, where they then say, let's be consistent, but they want you to have a free go at a player. So when we talk to these players and we identify, we say to them, look, do you realise that you're saying this? Do you realise what you're saying to a referee? And why do you think a referee would give you anything in the last 10 minutes when for the previous 80 you've been on their case, giving them loads of sticks? So it's like when you say about subconscious bias, I think it happens in a game. I think it would be unfair to say that referees can just get so miffed with players being on the case that they might not give a free kick that they would normally give. We've got to be honest about that.
A friend of mine referees at quite a low level. He said recently, first 10 minutes of a game, he showed a yellow card to a player for very, very abusive, offensive language. And the captain of the team said, look, I'm sorry about this, but he's got Tourette's. So the ref said, all right then, but he hasn't sworn for the first 10 minutes. And if he doesn't swear again in the next 10 minutes, I'm going to send him off. So, because obviously it's just the captain just panicked and came up with this bizarre excuse. I mean, that's the sort of thing referees are coping with. What's the attitude of other people in football towards you, Martin? Do they take you seriously? I mean, not just the Referees Association, but other players groups. Because I mean, one of your biggest problems is, even researching for this, it's sometimes hard in a way that Kieran's colourblind, and we take it very very seriously. But it's sometimes hard to have that much sympathy, and that's the difficulty with refs. When someone's been a football fan for as long as I have, many people in the game, I suspect, would think that referees were bottom of the pile when it came to sympathy, which I'm sure is an attitude that you come up against from other people in the game. Is that correct?
Absolutely, it's one of our major obstacles. Is that, and it's why I purposely chosen a strategy to go at clubs on social media who have a go at. I've even had to go with Gary Lineker. You know,
Yeah.
it's this desensitization of referee abuse that people just think it's always been there. It's all referees have always been fair game. People, I even remember there's on our podcast that you come on, Kev. I had Troy Townsend on,
Yeah.
and Troy Townsend said, "Oh my God, you schooled me on Twitter," and he uses the clip of me and him talking about it. He's been fighting racial abuse in the game for decades, done a wonderful job, and it's a cause that we're behind too. And he was naming the referee in one of the games. I think it might have been a Palace game when Andros was there, and he was giving the referee loads. And I said, "Oh, hang on, Troy," on Twitter. You know, why are you doing this? You think it's perfectly right to have a go at referee, but you can't say anything, from a racial point of view, which you agree with.
Yeah.
And it was an opening for him. He said, if Twitter was used that way, it would be such a better place than it is now, because I did point out to him, like, look, you're just as guilty of giving the abuse online, but you attack a different form of abuse.
Yeah.
So when we realised that attacking all forms of abuse, which is why the body cam campaign was so important to us, fight all forms of abuse is crucial. You can't just put, let's fight, homophobic abuse, racial abuse, anti-Semitic abuse. But if those people are a referee, they're fair game. We don't care what colour, creed, or they are. And it's awakening, the world really to understand that, refs aren't fair game. They are human. They are, they're not there just to be abused and shouted at just because you think you've got a right to do so. And that's why our social media campaign was important to show people, look, you can't go on Twitter and say that. Football clubs do it, famous people do it. And the amount of apologies I get, and I say to put a tweet out saying you've talked to me and that, because I'll phone them up. And they always understand. And it's like that famous quote of throwing one starfish back into the sea at a time. It helped that particular starfish when there's another million of them to go. And I think it's a long road we're on. But I think 4 years ago, no one was really interested in ref abuse, and it just happened and they accepted it. And we're trying to put a spotlight on it. I know it's not acceptable, and the game suffers all round if we allow this to happen at grassroots particularly.
Well, I mean, it's getting worse at the top level. As I said in my intro to you, Martin, I mean, VAR is not doing referees any favours at the moment, because all that's happening now on Match of the Day and on Sky and on BT Sport is that they've got 2 referees to have a go at in every game, not just one. And the thing is as well, I noticed with Gillette, is his name, I think. Is it the Australian ref?
Oh, yeah. Gerard, yeah.
Gerard, yeah, who's getting... There's several commentaries recently where they've scathingly mentioned that he's Australian, as though they don't expect the highest standards. And it must be frustrating. But so on that note, Martin, it's only in recent years that football has started properly looking after the welfare of youngsters, 16, 17, 18-year-olds who are not offered a professional contract. I mean, thank God the days are long gone when they just got a handshake and they were kicked out the door.
Yeah.
But does football offer counselling to referees who have been abused or assaulted, or is that delegated to you? Is there any process by which a referee has been horribly abused, and as you say, at the weekends the FA shut, but he wants would clubs wouldn't offer that? Would you offer that for them?
Yeah, we do. And in fairness to the FA, I've always said this about the FA. The FA have got many good people, but the bad people who don't seem to really put the interest of referees at heart is growing bigger and bigger and bigger, and they're always the loudest ones. The FA brought in the mental health first aiders in every county FA, which is a really positive thing to do, and we've done the same. And in fairness to the Referee Association, even though I disagree with many facets of the Referee Association, they have got a wonderful welfare team that helps referees who have been in these cases and defend them in the case when people appeal. So the answer is yes, but it's a small yes. It could be so much better and so much more professional. It's not really in your face that if this happens, this will happen. There's no sort of pathway of support dedicated. But in fairness to the FA, particularly under Mark Bullingham, I must admit that he does seem to be a man who's trying to put referees a bit more at the front of what they do. And Andy Ambler, who's the ex-Millwall chief exec, is now high profile, and the referees department is under his, one of his departments is under him. He said to me he's asking for more money to support referees because the budget isn't as good as it should be for supporting referees. So I really feel recently there is a move to support referees properly by the FA, but I'm yet to see it. I'm really yet to see what's happening. But going back to VAR, we've always said the only VAR that we're against is violence against referees.
Yeah, fair
And
point.
when they put more money into violence against referees, I think the whole game will improve. I really do.
I suppose as well, referees, certainly at a high level, will be terrified of the media finding out that they've had any sort of counselling, because players will, if players discover a weakness, they'll go for it, won't they? It's we are a football finance pod, Martin, so I would like to talk a little bit about money. It's actually, I've found this, I've been researching referees for a different project. It's really difficult to pinpoint how much Premier League referees get, but it seems to be, according to which website you visit, it seems to be a salary of sort of somewhere around 40,000 with an extra 1,200 to 1,500 per match. And at grassroots level, it's only around £30 a game. What are your thoughts on the pay at both ends of the referee scale?
I think those figures, the Premier League lads are definitely on more than that.
They are, okay.
Yeah, 100 grandish plus. When the FIFA referees as well, which you might not know about, there's different levels of FIFA referee. They get more money because the FIFA referees. They get more games when they go abroad, and a fee on top of that. So it can very easily scale up. But you are right; it is vague, and really, people always think it's a bit crass in it, talking about someone's wages, and it's not as much as probably every Premier League referee is on a week. Premier League players on a week. Yeah, and they stand in a line with these people who are multimillionaires, and they've got to manage them on TV, in front of millions of people across the world. So, I don't think they'll never be on enough, to be honest. I really do believe that, they should increase the pay where they can attract everybody, rather than people who have got more money outside the game who could be wonderful referees at that level. The conference level, like I said, the National League, they're on about £165 a game. EFL referees are on about $550 plus expenses, meal allowance and stuff like that. And then the bottom, they are all around about 35, 40 quid. So I don't think increasing the money will be the problem, because in rugby, they don't get paid until a very high level, and there's hardly any abuse there. So I wouldn't tie in with money. I just think it's this desensitization that, when you're in the middle as a male, female, you're just fair game. And it's just changing this mindset that, particularly with children, Kev, one of the huge problems is, the FA brought out this campaign where they identify children now, child referees who are under the age of 18, with a purple shirt or green socks or an armband.
Oh, right.
I don't know if you're aware of that. And that is that is to identify that if you are threatening or being horrible to that referee, that's a child. And we said for a while, I think that was a backward step, because a lot of these children don't want to be identified as a child.
Yeah,
they're a bit, you know what I mean. So like they won't wear it, and I just don't like the idea that, like, oh look, don't shout at this one because he's a child, but this one's okay because he's an adult.
Yeah,
so I think it's flawed. It's completely flawed. And when I wrote to Mark Bullingham recently, I said, we need to look at deducting points. If you get found guilty of threatening or abusing a child referee, you lose points. Just lose, because money doesn't work in the game. The yellow cards and red cards have had a financial punishment for decades, and it's getting worse. So clearly, money doesn't work. So let's look at points.
I remember an interview with John Fashanu years ago when he said, semi-seriously, he said that every referee should be given a sports car, because if players turned up in the car park and said, wow, that's a brilliant car, who's that belong to? And he found out it was the refs, they would have a little bit more respect for him than they would otherwise, which is kind of an insight into footballers. Would you just before we've got a couple more questions for you, Martin? Can you just remind our listeners who Mark Bullingham is, by the way? Sorry.
Oh, Mark Bullingham is the chief executive of the FA, and someone I am seeing really good signs in changing the game for referees positively.
Right. I suppose the money at grassroots level, like you say, referees don't come into it for money, but it might help retention of referees a little bit more if they were paid more at grassroots level. But if we can't pay them more money, Martin, as compensation, how do we protect them against what's happening to them? I mean, apart from changing the entire culture of English football, which will take 30 years, what can we do just in the short term? Because, I mean, what you're telling us is is horrifying. And it's like having to be, Kieran and I are mature, sensible, decent people, I like to think. But, you having to remind us that some of those referees being shouted at children, that's awful. That's awful. It just didn't occur to me. But so what do we do then? How do we build walls of protection around these young match officials?
Well, first, another thing we've suggested is when someone is found guilty of threatening a child referee, it's never been framed principally as a safeguarding breach. But safeguarding breaches can have, different effects on a coach. They can take his badge away. They can stop him coaching. Whereas if they fine him 30 quid, well, he's going to be back in 3 weeks after his ban and continue the abuse. So I think framing it differently, particularly to referees who are 18 and under. And of course, the FA said wearing an armband mitigates that. He should have known that was a child as well. So that's the only positivity I think about the armbands with regards to identifying children. But deducting points, absolutely deducting points, will make people realise that, these people who they have on the line, they were often parents. There's a consequence to the team. So take ownership of who you have watching your game. I also think when we had our body cam campaign, and we were absolutely overjoyed that the IFAB said, we're allowing the FA to do a body cam trial. We've been pushing that for a long, long time because we know people will see a ref for a body cam. I know it's not a good image, I get that. But as a deterrent, as an evidence gatherer, and as a training aid for referees, I think it's a no-brainer, which I'm really pleased that when they announced they're going to look at a body cam pilot at grassroots level, I think that would be the biggest positive move for protecting referees at a grassroots level. So we're delighted the FA pushed that out to IFAB.
And finally, and I know from reading your website that this is a very important issue to you, Martin. When will we start to see more Black and Asian officials, more women officials, more ex-footballers taking up the whistle?
Again, in my recent letter to Mark Bullingham, they asked me, they had this new change, a refereeing culture change and the strategy, and he consulted me. I met with them, and one of the things that I got back to them is that we've got to address the problem with racism differently than they do. It's clear some areas have not got any BAME representation at all, right, but they will get the same amount of money to address it as someone who lives, say, in Toxteth or Brixton or St Paul's and Bristol. You need to be more laser-like in how to address it and give the funding to the places where we know will be get affected. It's no use like giving free suntan lotion to people who live in Greenland. Do you know what I mean? So we need to do the funding and look at it in a real considered manner to address the areas where there's a high representation of the BAMES community. My last game, one of my last games was at Uriah Rennie. I got injured on the line at Aston Villa against Burnley years ago. And there's been no black referees, black or brown referees in the middle since then. We've only had Sam Allison come through and the Sings brothers who've come through recently. But it's a huge problem, and I just feel that the FA's never really recognised it. Also, when David Ellery made those racial comments that he admitted, he was chairman, he was president of the Referee Association, and the Referee Association didn't condemn those comments. So that put the Referee Association on a back foot that I don't think they've really recovered from since. They should have really. Lord Ousley, who was the main man at Kick It Out, he actually called for Ellery to resign, but the Referee Association didn't say a peep, and I think that was a mistake. I think when we all get hold of it and speak out as one, players, clubs, and referees, I think things will change.
I do have one more question, actually, Martin, and it's an indication of how my mind works, because you said Greenland. you said Greenland, and I suddenly went, oh, abroad, foreign. Are you working with referees organisations in other countries? And is this, I wouldn't say uniquely a British problem, but do you think the referees get more support? Certainly in continental Europe. Are you working with referees and officials around the world as well?
Yeah, particularly on our social media, we get lots of people contact us and send us clips, and we've had so many clips of people getting seriously injured in Malta, in Argentina, and historically we put a video out 4 years ago of a referee getting surrounded on the pitch and getting his head kicked in. Basically, no one was ever suspended or that as a player. And when that went on, Dan Rowan from the BBC ran with it, 1 million views, and everyone said, "What part of South America was that?" It was in London. It was in London.
No, well,
It was in London. I'll send you the clip. It's a horrendous clip, and we then people started sending all these other clips. We had another referee in London who got punched 3 times. He got suspended for 10 years. On appeal, the FA reduced it to 5, which
Jesus.
is an unbelievable backward move, which they're telling me they're going to do different things to address that sort of avenue, but not to be seen. So there's many cases that this is a world problem, which is why I was so delighted that IFAB have allowed the FA to do this body cam pilot, which should encourage other nationalities to do it, around the world. And one of the things we worked on, which I got a bit of stick for, if I was honest, Kev, we've created an app. It's going to be a free app, which turns your phone into a body camera. And not like you get those people who go for a run and they put on their arm, they've got to snap it, put the phone. We got one that goes around your chest. It's all free. Free. You can use that. So it's not going to cost you 200 quid for a body cam. Just use your phone, put it on selfie video, and you've got it. So we know it's going to be a real effective way of addressing it across the world. And, this is the first real positive move I've seen by IFAB in addressing the abusive referees and assaultive referees ever, really. I was delighted to see this pilot. But in fairness to the FA, I know they've asked IFAB, when can we do it and what's happening, but nothing's going on.
Martin, it's been a pleasure. Well, actually, it hasn't been a pleasure to talk to you in a way, because of some of the things you've told us are horrendous. But it's been brilliant insight, and I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. And I suspect we'll probably get you back, because there's undoubtedly more to explore on this topic. But in the meantime, I just wish you the very best of luck with everything you're doing, and let's hope that it doesn't take 20 years for a complete culture change. But keep up the good work, Martin. And if there's anything we can do to help, then please let us know.
That's ever so kind. Thank you, guys. You've got a wonderful podcast, and I wish you all a continued success. And thanks again for having me on.
Kieran, I have to say reservations about interviewing Martin Cassidy, only because we are a football finance pod and there wasn't much to talk about by way of finances. But I'm very glad that we did, because some of that insight we got there, and we could have been talking to him for a lot longer. It's just horrifying to think what's going on, and it was a sobering interview in a way, Kieran, wasn't it? Martin's a brilliant speaker and a very funny man, but it's some of the things he was telling us, it's difficult to be funny about, wasn't it?
Yes. I think he represented the case for referees absolutely superbly. And as somebody that I did my refereeing exams when I was 16 and started to referee, and there was we didn't have the internet. With you were on your own. And as somebody that has been threatened myself, to know that there's actually now there is a support network out there is absolutely fantastic. And as Martin himself says, he's looking forward to the day when Ref Support UK is no longer required. But we're a long, long way away from that. When the culture is, if a player makes a mistake, then that's all part of the game. If a referee does something which is wrong in the opinion of somebody else, and quite often, normally the referee's right, then that gives people carte blanche to abuse and threaten. And also, I think, as Martin said, the referees are local, and there is a genuine danger of you're out on a Saturday night or a Friday night, and somebody who you've had conflict with sees you, and things can get really unpleasant.
Yeah, I really don't mean this to sound flippant, Kieran, but part of the problem is that at Palace's next home game, I'll be in the Parsons Arms beforehand telling people about this interview, and they'll all be going, "Oh, crikey, that's terrible. We didn't know." And the minute Craig Pawson inevitably gives Palace a bad decision, Will be up on my feet shouting abuse at the referee. That is the issue. It's the nature of the football fan. But I will try and moderate my behaviour. It's less of a problem at that level. But at grassroots level, and anybody listening to this who plays football at grassroots level, leave the referees alone, for the love of God. Thanks to everyone who's donated to the pod via our Patreon page. If you'd like to make a small monthly contribution to the pod, that would be very kind of you. And go to patreon.com/priceoffootball. Our next live show, as you know, is now taking place at Plymouth Argyle's home park on Tuesday, the 13th of December. I can't wait to be in Plymouth again. Some tickets are still available because we had to move the date, and you can get them from Plymouth Argyle's website. If you have a question you'd like answered on the show, email us at questions@priceoffootball.com. And in the meantime, I shall hand you over to Mr. Kieran Maguire for his customary farewell.
Well, thanks as always, folks, for the support for the show. A number of you have been in contact with me and us over one of the stories we ran on Sunday. I'll be giving a full apology in respect of that on next Sunday's show. But it's great the fact that you do keep us on our toes and you engage with all of the stories as well. If you want to support the show, Patreon's is as cheap as £1 a month, and for £3 a month you can listen to the show without adverts if you prefer to go down that particular route. The other way you can support the show is to go on to your podcast app. And if you can give us a review, it helps us in the charts. It helps with the algorithms. If you can give us 5 stars, it genuinely makes a difference. And by all accounts, it doesn't make a blind bit of difference what you choose to write in the interview, because the Apple algorithm looks at the stars and not the words. So you could even say that you would rather have the show presented by Hugh Edwards. Now, Hugh Edwards is a man who I think if anybody's entitled after the shift he's put in to start wearing a man bun and buy a Harley Davidson in a midlife crisis, I think he's entitled to one. And Beaker from the Muppets, and it wouldn't make a blind bit of difference to myself or Kevin. Our egos can cope with it.
Yeah, it's nice to know that the Amazon, like all of us, Kieran, we are all of us in the gutter, that some of us are looking at the stars. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
The price of football. The price of football.